Let's challenge our limitations and promote our curiosity on education and so much more. This is the No Box Podcast with Dr. T.
Hey, is this thing on? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the No Box Podcast. You know, I'm always super excited with our guests, and today I'm perhaps a little more super excited to welcome retired General John Michel to the studio today. John's going to join us for what I think is going to be an amazing conversation around entrepreneurship, around leadership, around the future of community engagement and how we as educators and leaders can really come together to build a stronger and more sustainable future. So I'm going to give John a chance here after you meet him, talk a bit about his background. But John, welcome, sir, to the podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Well, my friend, it's a joy to be here, and both on this incredible campus and then specific with you as we carry on our conversations around innovation, collaboration, and people, the things we really love.
Yes, exactly. So in that regard, just to kind of maybe jump right into the deep end, talk to us a little bit about your journey and how you got to really the place you are as it relates to some of the projects that you're involved in, and in particular, Soul Shill Kitchen, which is kind of cool and innovative in its own name. But you're all about bringing people together and innovation and connection and really helping advance the work we all do in the community. So talk to us about how that journey started and how you got to where you're at.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for that. And yes, it's been probably a different journey than you would expect to have. I'm a social entrepreneur, SOULCIAL, right? We kind of made up a word, and we'll get to that later. But I started in thinking I wanted to be an attorney. Went to school. Things happened, and I had the opportunity to. I'd like to say that I had this long time ambition to be a military officer, but it was more convenient. I was going to school in Texas, decided to go ahead and try ROTC out, candidly a way to make a couple hundred extra bucks, and then a month and then at the same time, just maybe explore what that world would be like. And long story short, I jumped into it, had the ability to go to summer camp, and then ended up graduating at the top of the class. So they said, hey, you can now we'll give you a scholarship for anything you want to do. So in that moment, I was like, well, I think I'll fly airplanes. And I'd like to say there was more thought process and more intention now, but sometimes life gives you an opportunity, and that's the first. So I was like, okay, I'll step into that. So I said, I'm going to do that for 6 to 8 years. Anyhow, 26 years later, I had a very blessed opportunity in the Air Force to lead at many different levels, to be exposed to incredible people, and most importantly, to further reinforce the importance of a keen sense of mission. My last role was the commanding general for NATO Air Training Command, where we were responsible for building the $8 billion Afghan Air Force. I had 14 countries, 800 people, 5 different bases in an active war zone. Super cool change project from the standpoint of it's dynamic, hard, never attempted in history. I decided at that time frame about midway in the tour, I was like, all right, I really want to get out and get back to some of these other passions. And so I was able to get the establishment to say, okay, when you're done with Afghanistan, we're going to let you transition and become officially a civilian right around my 50th birthday, and have always had a passion for entrepreneurship and education. Yeah. So anyhow, I jumped off there and we started the adventure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it was a journey that led to social entrepreneurship in a very indirect path or a non-traditional path, but was one that couldn't have been a better education, not just in terms of the way we think about academics, but the way we think about the reality of working in dynamic situations with other people.
So you made a statement in an interview that I watched about innovation, that it's really about doing not necessarily the same things, but doing things that have already been done in new and novel ways. And, as you've seen your journey sort of traject into or project out into really having influence and really, I think you noted working with all these incredible people, thinking about change and innovation, those are really scary words to people because it means that things have to be done differently. What are some of the things that in your journey have gotten in the way or that you've noticed as being true barriers, and how have you worked around those, whether they're people, process, policy? Just what's your insight to that?
No, I think it's a great question. And you're right. When we live in a world where everyone thinks innovation often is associated with, I have to create something new, a new technology. And the reality is the vast majority of innovations and the ones that really stick are the ones you combined existing things in new and novel ways. And that's really now, and the nice thing about those is, I'll use our example of Social Kitchen. Our idea was we've lost 92% of the soup kitchen capacity in America during COVID. We're not going to reinvent soup kitchen. Soup kitchens aren't coming back in their form with employee or volunteer, all those things. So we see this thing called food trucks. Now, we didn't invent food trucks, but we saw them growing in popularity, and we're like, now that's interesting. It has wheels. It can get to places that are probably hard to reach. Yeah. Then we matched it with, well, what if we can then take individuals who want to build a better life, what we call entrepreneurs, and we provide a little training, and then when the ones that we can really demonstrate their commitment, we could then combine them with this thing called a food truck. And so we just innovated a whole new way of actually servicing an industry that it's a valid need in America. So all this goes along the way. We have, like anything, the barriers to progress are, you're going to have some people who are just, people don't like to have their cheese punted, to use the old who moved my cheese. They don't like, because we live in a world of the as is, and the as is a simple locus of control, right? People get a sense of stability. So there has to be an elegance, and most importantly, a deep intentionality to do. So once you know that that's where people are going to start from, you do want to create a clear and compelling to be. That's the thing. People want a different thing in life. We hear people talk about it all the time, but going from the place of comfort and where they are to where they want to be, that's what we call leadership. That's the bridge and understanding that the road bumps in there's road bumps called policies, there's bureaucracies, there's a lot of things that exist, but that's all they are. They are simply road bumps along the journey, that the key is keep the arrow moving in the right direction, be inclusive, and you cannot communicate. We talked a little bit before the show started. You cannot communicate enough. Right. That's the thing. If in doubt, talk more, not less, when you're trying to lead people to a different place. And I think that's the ultimate lesson that I've learned throughout all the journeys and change projects.
Wow. What's the one outcome that you've seen in really this short time? I mean, we think of, COVID happened, that disrupted a lot. And now that we are really looking at serving community and really, I think, trying to engage with food insecurity and engaging with communities that are underserved. What are some of the things that you've noticed in that work as being like, wow, like this is amazing, and I never thought we'd see this as soon as we did, or interesting that this occurred and now we are able to move to like a next level? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, what have been those sort of outcomes that you're like, man, this is remarkable?
No, it's and I would tell you, one experience I can say we all have is we all go to restaurants. I mean, we just do it, right? It's one of the things, whether we like food or we want to hang out with people or we want to try something new. Right. But this is getting to the biggest aha, or what I call the thing that was invisible in plain sight in terms of a potential solution. And sometimes when the world gets flipped on its head, or in the case of COVID, it just completely created a whole series of challenges, but at the same time, every challenge can be met with an opportunity if you reframe your thinking, right? And that's what these kind of conversations are about. So I went to restaurants and did things, and I saw food trucks at fun events. So when we decided we want to tackle this particular problem, the big thing that really hit me is all we really did is we incentivized access to latent capacity. And here's what I mean. Every bit of capacity we needed in America to feed hungry people is already here right now, because we already have restaurants operating everywhere, and they're not operating at 100% every single day. They have available capacity. Trucks are operating across America and growing exponentially every day. The discovery was, wow, if we can actually all job was to create a story. This is what we're trying to do and why. It's already compelling. Help feed hungry people, but not just feed them. Give them the dignity of what it's like to have a restaurant experience that others often take for granted. Not in a bad way, we just do because we can. Yeah. And so when we go, and all we're gonna do is engage people that are already in the business. So if we can find a way to tap into existing restaurant owners, not just create a little more revenue, but say, then you get to have a mission of blessing somebody else's life. Then when you do it with food trucks, and then you start to engage. So the clarity of a mission, the fact it was a different approach, but easily understandable. Yeah. If I was creating something new, I'd have to explain to everybody what the new thing was. When I said, we're just using things that exist, and we can now create this output, and I think that's why it's grown exponentially, is the inherent simplicity of the model. Now, simplicity is what enables scale. And scale is what can really create momentum, right? And then hopefully more people continue to buy in and the dream grows.
As I've kind of done a little research beyond what I've learned about you just from you, we've met several times already, and there's some, I think, really amazing opportunities with the college, both with around Food is Love, which we can talk about a little bit as well, and how the college can really be a platform for helping educate the community beyond what we might look at education being in sort of a normal way. So around hospitality. And I mean, just recently, was asked to be part of a grant, which really links into some of the conversations we have had with the Madison County in helping build some of these pathways. But you talk about simplicity. And, I think it's a simple word, right? But the utility of that word can be quite complex, because people might say, wow, this is a really amazing opportunity, but it's so complex. So talk to us as an audience around how you sort of disseminate the word simplicity, and how you're able to frame perhaps a complex opportunity as something simple. I mean, what's your philosophy on that, and how do you go about doing that?
Well, again, it's part of it comes from just, for me, it's natural to look at the world in systems. It just unfolds that way. I can look at things. I can have a keen sense of how this connects to that.
Right.
And anybody who's really going to be successful in any regard at affecting change,
right,
has to be some. It's almost as if some level of chess in our heads, right? But we just see it in systems. So when you see systems, what you see is of various pieces and parts, and you can understand how they might influence each other. So simplicity, where it's absent is when people take something and we spend so much time on the elements of what it looks like together, or just what the outcome's going to be, because that's the exciting part, is like, right, we don't take the time to unpack and go, let me just tell you about this piece, and then let me tell you about this piece. So if you notice in our journey, we started with a food truck. And we said, we're going to focus on a food truck. And then we learned in that process, like, wow, these are harder. 62% of them fail. Why? No training. So we said, well, let's take and solve that piece. So we actually built it piece by piece by immersing ourselves in it. Then the truck, which is innately cool but difficult to run, we now create a program. In the process of doing that program, people are now getting, and it was less about food that they were failing, and 90% because of business, right? People who think like, I'm going to get a truck and I love making burgers. Great. Then you realize the math is not adding up. And so when we start to close that gap, and then we can combine another piece. We tend to there's a tendency to want to keep throwing things in. Yeah. And all that does is further complicate or obscure the vision for people, because not everyone sees the world in systems. But I found if we just take a piece at a time, make sure people understand where that piece fits, and we can add more pieces. And you're right. If people just look at this, they're like, sounds complex. Not if you start, pick up where we started. And then entrepreneurs became the next. We had great people, killed it in training. Yeah. They don't have access to money. So we solved the next thing. And if you really think about life in general, that's kind of the journey. It's like a progressive journey towards a desired end state. Yes. And a desired end state is a better self, a stronger family, a stronger, better community, or whatever that may be. And so I think simplicity is born of intentionality, of taking the time to understand the pieces, helping people become familiar with the pieces. Then they don't become so scary when you take those pieces and start to put them into something that looks like a different but exciting picture.
So kind of building off of that, and really I think part of the ability, I think, to move things forward is to, make those connections. So there's a connection to Food is Love. You're wearing that shirt. Talk to us a little bit about Food is Love and how you got involved in that work as well, and its link back to our local community, as well as I think the broader. I mean, there's a lot of things going on nationally as well and internationally. So just talk to us a little bit about what it is and your involvement.
Sure. Now, Food is Love. I think when you step back and go, well, food is love. We love food, and so it's, you couldn't think of a more. I think it's the most perfect name I've ever heard, not just for a television show, but for like just joy in life. Yeah. But several years ago, the work we were doing at Social Kitchen and with the Currency of Caring, and not just it was social, around the ideas of social impact and reducing food insecurity, got the attention of the Food is Love producers, and they came and did a show, season 3, episode 9, and they were first time that I have really a food truck on there, and first time they actually had a mission-based organization. That's the biggie takeaway. It's
Yes.
wow. So you're using hospitality in this non-traditional form called a food truck, though exciting and growing. And the real impetus behind the whole business is to find a way to solve a community problem involving people. And if we can, in that process, grow more small businesses, because the other casualty of COVID were tons of small businesses, right? And we've since
went away, right?
We're proud of that fact that we've grown 8 businesses, spawned 8 businesses in 2 years. And it's just a system now, and we can talk about that later if need be. But when you talk about food is love, so they're like, wow, this is interesting. So Lassiter and I really hit it off, because food is love is about how people from different cultures can come together. So it doesn't matter where you started, where you're at, what your background, food unites. Food is a standard way to be able to get people for a moment to set everything else down and connect over something really simple. And in that connection, then comes hopefully learning and appreciation and ultimately relationship. Well, fast forward, our mutual friend John Simmons was looking for some advice and things related to food trucks and food truck parks and what's going on up there. And long story short, Lassiter and I from Food is Love, the original, he's still the face of Food is Love and the originator of Food is Love, got reconnected here in January in Alton by complete accident. And we realized, wow, where we've matured in our journey and where the journey is going with Food is Love on a more national level. And what did it was the keen desire, not just because I love food. The idea of mission was more important today than ever. And for people now to understand that food also can serve a purpose in this area of mission. So we combined them. We combined our nonprofits together. I took over the Food is Love national nonprofit to take care of all things social impact for Food is Love and then our collective family in the region. And so the alignment was natural. And now Lassiter and I will announce soon another significant collaboration around Food is Love that's going to represent a very real food experience, entrepreneurial experience, and mission experience that's going to be here in this local area. So we're excited.
One of the things that came up, I know we had you in the office, I don't know, it's been a month or two now, and a couple times, I think the second time invited some of my team here on the campus, one of our areas of focus is community. So we have, put a lot of time and energy into how do we not only build and strengthen this culture on our campus, and I want to dive into that a little bit as well in terms of educational culture and then its alignment with what we see happening, what we don't see happening in communities. But the other part of that is to look outward, to look into our communities. We serve a pretty broad region, a lot of rural communities. And I think like anywhere, there are vulnerabilities in all of our communities. So when we think about the factor of food, we think about the factor of education, we think just about maybe the factor of just communication and how we're able to connect communities together, connect the college with community, connect opportunities to have access to good, healthy food. So this is a pretty nebulous question, but I'm really, really excited about the opportunity to perhaps be more engaged in our community through some of the work you're doing. And this crazy idea is, why don't we have, for example, a trailblazer food truck? Like, we're the trailblazers, and we're in these communities serving food, talking about education, connecting people together. Like when we think about, and it's the question of like, what's next for Social Kitchen, but what's next in your mind in bringing in more educational entities to help facilitate this work that needs to be happening across communities? Because I feel we're missing something there, and just curious as to like that sort of what's next and how do you see that happening?
I can tell you, I'll just make it simple in that it's we need more show and less tell.
Yep.
Okay, and that's in a lot of different areas in life. But if you think about the historical ways of education have tended to be people come in, they expect some people to speak into them, they learn, they're taught.
Yep.
But in that now, unfortunately, we've seen that evolve to where now the mediums at work is there's got to be engagement on both sides. It really allows people to internalize. And when they internalize both in their thinking and then ultimately when they manifest in their doing, that's is where this is what real learning, that's where the real learning sticks. And this is where when you start to combine that with other things, you can use that for change, individual change and collective change. I'll take any community that we have in America. There's lots of good things going on in every community. It tends to be hyper fragmented, especially on the things that relate to more serving the marginalized, or those, and whether we're talking about housing insecurity, food insecurity, justice insecurity. I mean, we can keep all marching. Yep. So we all have these basic things that allow us to achieve dignity as human beings and strength as community. And so where education really has an opportunity, and we've seen it significantly occur with the development of the food truck apprentice program. We didn't set out to be an education program. But what we realized is with massive failure rates, those were an education problem first. Yeah. We had to teach and give them the basic skills, the way we do it in the military. We send everyone to boot camp for a reason. There is no opting out. Yeah. You don't get to be the most buff person, and everyone's going to the same thing because we're enculturating you, which is where things really happen. We're getting everyone on the same shared way to think. Yep. And so in communities, we tend to see a lot of well-intentioned folks, but with hyper-fragmentation, we have a lot of it's just not very efficient. What starts to change it is we started with using education as a way to give, and then to give people opportunities to understand how to do better. Then we were able to identify other gaps. By doing those and walking kind of through that value chain, we were then able to inspire other organizations. And our goal is always, who else can we invite? We always ask ourselves a question every day: who can we invite? They don't have to have a truck. I'm just using our social kitchen example. Yeah. It's a model of how we work with Riverbend Family Ministry. We look for the people who are doing things and say, where can we find our commonalities? Because in those commonalities, we now can find ways to do things more efficiently. And the more efficient we do things as a community, the more impact we can have. So if in a world of growing need, which is America, right, and diminishing resources, which is just the natural thing, we realize that's a model that can be applied to a lot of things. But education is at the core because it's a way for us to get everyone involved in how they can just improve their own story.
So we're going to take a break, but when we get back, just to tee it up a little bit, I'd love to dive into the education piece. And I'm interested in your opinions and perspectives around what the next generation of education looks like. So thank you,
Fear
John.
not, I have opinions and ideas.
All right.
Yo, what up? It's Mike Keith, a proud graduate of Lewis and Clark. I got my start in the radio program that put me on the path to where I am today. We still do radio, but now we're so much more. Podcasting, producing, and editing, not to mention new equipment, studios, courses, and a new name. If you want to work in professional media or create better content for the things you love, do like I did and discover your path at Lewis and Clark Community College. Enroll today at lc.edu.
So welcome back. Again, guest today is retired General John Michel, and we're going to jump right back in, John. And as a leader in education, obviously super passionate about education, about community, but I'm also very passionate about transformation and innovation, and never sort of being able to lean back in the chair and say, "Hey, this is working really well. Let's take a break." I think we have to continue to push. And so for me, taking this model, right, that we're talking about, food trucks and social kitchen and engaging communities and looking at innovation and training and hospitality, bringing that into the communities. We're a community college. And so I am really excited and fired up about this idea of, we now have a new partnership with LeMay's Catering in town. That's going to look and feel and sound and taste different than it ever has before. We're no longer looking at, hey, we want to partner with somebody to serve food on campus. We want somebody to be on campus that's going to be part of our culture. But now beyond that, how do we bring that into the community? And thinking about education and some of the vulnerability we face, and we can dig into this as well, but, enrollments, and are people really interested in education? Or is education is important, but maybe it looks and feels different, which we'll talk about. How do we bring this work into our communities in a way that allows us to engage, to bring students, to engage faculty and staff in ways that they never thought was possible? In other words, I want to be on that other side of the window, talking to a family in Whitehall or Gillespie, serving food, but also serving a positive message about education and connection. Let's dig into that.
I love it.
I mean, there's not even a question in that. It's just, what are your thoughts on that, and how do we make that happen? Because I want to make that happen here at Lewis and Clark.
And I think actually it's the perfect place and the perfect time, and I'll explain why. So you've indicated that, well, all we have is we have some experience and we've tested some things out at kind of scale, and we're seeing adoption in other places. We're like, okay, we have something here. You have a relationship with a new innovative, and they happen to be a partner of ours with LeMay Catering and Jason and his wife, and they're phenomenal. Their heart is exactly around service. They're committed to their work, and they're very open to not being what you would consider a traditional catering of food. So you've got all the right elements. You've got a person who's got an open mind and a great heart, and they just want to create a delightful experience for the students. So you've already got that moving in this direction. So what happens is when you take the combination of what we've done in our space with food trucks and innovation, and you combine it with the right people that are coming to provide a service to your, you have one other dimension. So you have students. Right now, when we look at what's happening across the board in hospitality, it is one of the most, it is one of the areas that's struggling the greatest across the nation. We all experience it in these long lines at restaurants because half of them's closed because we've lost people, so many have fallen away. Part of that is because the traditional hospitality experience isn't as keenly interesting to young people anymore. And I go back to why food trucks are. Food trucks are growing exponentially, and part of it is because it's just a little joy box with 4 wheels that you get a different experience every time. They're colorful. It's just a ultimate manifestation of creativity, and people love it, both sides of that window. So what you have the opportunity to do here is go, what if we can speak to a more focused approach to a hospitality experience, in the case of a food truck, that at least the statistics show is very appealing to young people. And the secret sauce that would then tie it all together is the ability to have a higher purpose or a mission. And that mission is, what if we could get people and students excited? We can involve them in the process. We can leverage the skills of LeMay Catering, and then we can provide some advisement and perspective with our own experience. Put all that with the idea of going into broken parts of the community or just anywhere we want to bring life and love and opportunity and great hot food. And all that's available right now, because with the right people, we can bring the right one asset and think about this little, and then that asset, that journey, that food truck becomes something tangible and physical people can be involved in. Your students then can go, I think I want to learn how to be a food truck entrepreneur because I think I like to cook, but I just don't want to do it in the traditional sense. And then you invite your staff and the students and everybody just to be part of the evolving experiment, we'll call it. And a key part of that involvement would be not just the food inside the truck, the ability to be a blessing using that truck. And that's where community impact comes in. And now you've got something that's so easy for people to get excited about.
Oh, I agree. You mentioned the experiment, and I think in education, we've had, and maybe this is the edgy statement, we've had a lack of experimentation, a lack of innovation, I think, over time, to where we've done things the way we've always done them, and now we're faced with this reckoning. And I feel, the work that you're doing as it relates to food, but it also relates to education, and it also relates to connection. Thinking about in the context of education, we see schools closing, we see schools struggling, we see schools making cuts that oftentimes seem, unstrategic, meaning that we better cut because we're way behind the 8 ball. And so what are your opinions around what's happening in education and where we've gone, where things went wrong? I mean, and I get it. I'm going to give you like what I don't want you to say as an answer. It's like COVID turned us on our heads. And I think it pushed us over the edge, and it opened people's eyes. But I'm going to argue that the symptoms of what we're seeing happen now happened way before COVID. And so, you're a seasoned leader. You've been around the block. You've seen it at all levels. What the heck's going on with education, and what needs to happen to get us to that next level?
No, you're right. It isn't. All COVID did, in my view, and I think our shared view, is it accelerated what was already happening. These undertows, these things that were already ailing the industry were just brought to full view, right? And so education, like other things in life, gets very comfortable doing what it does. Dollars get programmed a certain way and people figure it out. So we keep doing it the same way. People think that they get bound by what's working or what's easy, and that's become the delivery mechanisms. But The undertow started 2 decades ago with the manifestation of technology in people's hand in the form of a supercomputer we call a phone. Yeah. Our ability to distribute information. We're having a podcast right now. Who would have thought that people could have their own podcast studios just X amount of time ago? These were relegated to big broadcast companies. And so the whole world of possibility has unfolded at an accelerated fashion, in large part because of technology over the last 2 decades. And so the means by which we need to think about how we deliver it, how we experience it, those have all been going on, but with the systems, especially big systems include government, big systems certainly include education, just like they do healthcare. Healthcare, you saw COVID, they use that as an accelerant for telehealth and other things that were always available that really flattened the world for them. It's a game changer, both financially, but also in terms of how more people can reach it and how you can do it more efficiently. Why is education not the same? And that's what we've seen. Now we want people with trades. We want apprenticeships. We want non-traditional forms of learning. We want more bite-sized little experiences. Like, I don't want to be a traditional culinary program. I want to operate a food truck. Is a perfect example of, like, we got to meet people where they're at, and technology, and we have the right people. We can do so and create such a more unique experience. It almost has to be more tailored experience for education that leave you with real skills that tap into your real passions and desires. And if we think just going to a chalkboard or whatever medium it is and sitting at there and giving a lecture is going to be enough to capture people's heart and minds, absolutely not. And that's why people are falling away. They can do more education for free on YouTube sometimes than they feel like they're getting in a classroom. Yeah. And the schools and other places that continue down that, and there won't be many left because the smart ones are shifting the entire model. Yeah. And the model's got to be more dynamic.
And I'll tell you, I'm getting more to the point where it's not even a negotiation anymore around needing to change. I mean, I have thought for many, many years, and I feel, and it's not about patting yourself on the back, but I mean, being able to mobilize people and being able to get them to focus on, hey, we've got to try new things. I mean, this studio we're in now, this program, Mike, who's behind the camera, is leading this program. I mean, this was part of really stepping back and saying, how do I reimagine this program to meet students where they're at, to be aligned with what's happening in the industry. So it's not a matter of attracting students. Hey, come and you're going to be in a classroom and we're going to teach you how to do this. But rather, we're going to create the environment in which you have the ability to learn, and not only from me as perhaps the faculty member, but from each other, from the environment, from technology, to really do something that no one else has done. So a big part of how I've framed a lot of this change is around the idea, and being a military man, you understand competency-based education. I mean, it's been a fundamental part of military education, and even in Europe, it's been a very important part of training around manufacturing. But essentially, it's more about what you know, but you learn, you master, you move forward. Mm-hmm. And so the controversial statement sometimes that I say, which is odd coming from like a president of a college, is like comparing the degree to the mall. It's like the end of the degree is near. But the beginning of the focus on competency-based education is really heating up, in that if I'm looking to get a job, is it more important that I'm highly competent in doing that job, or that I have a couple of really fancy degrees that I guess suggest that I am able to do that job? So it's this tension, though, between those two, because I think degrees are important, but also maybe it's a matter of how we frame them. The credentials, are there certain pathways that we can create? Let's say, I walk up to Lewis and Clark and I want this, this, and this. I can kind of create sort of this education a la carte environment where these are the things I need to understand and learn so that I can get this job. Or maybe I have a good job, but I need a promotion. I need this, 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 and this. It's kind of bringing it back to food. It's like looking at that menu and saying, I want this, this, and this. And imagine going to that restaurant and you're like, hey, I don't want onions. Can I get mushrooms? And I don't want cheese, but could I get avocado? And they're like, we can't do that. Not going back to that restaurant. Same thing with education. It's like, I want this, 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 and this. So it's almost as if we're customizing education to meet the needs of not only what the students expect, but I think the students oftentimes are expecting what they see the environment wanting, the requiring environment, meaning the jobs, the workforce. So for me, like, and some people think that's radical change. And, we've been working on that here at the college. And, I'm honest. I mean, we have folks that are jumping in. We have folks that are still kind of, in the margins, kind of leaning, but then lean back and then lean forward because they're uncertain. And, we have a lot of work we have to do even as a leadership group to really create the mechanisms of support around that. But I look at really the future of education looking and feeling and sounding very, very different. And I don't say this is going to happen, in 10 or 15 years. I'm talking it's happening right now. And so as colleges close and as colleges struggle, I mean, I blame that on a lack of innovation, a lack of taking a look at credentials and just saying, how do we think about that differently? It's like I'm still teaching you how to be an amazing broadcast, somebody out in broadcasting, but I'm doing it differently. Or I'm still teaching you how to be an amazing welder. I'm just doing it differently. The environment changes. So I don't know if there's a question in that. It's more of like, this is the environment we're in. And so from your broad perspective, why maybe is it so difficult for people, and I'm being general in the definition of people, it could be leaders, it could be faculty, it could be legislators, of saying, well, we'll just wait, or, we'll just keep doing it the way we're doing it because, I haven't missed a paycheck and, I'm still getting paid. I mean, right, we're still getting funded. But what happens when, you're up against that wall and you're like, gosh, if only we would have started to experiment? Back to that idea you brought up, is like, it's the experimentation, it's trying new things. What's the issue? Like what have you seen in your experience of like, wow, because you've seen it, right? I mean, things have had to change, over time in everything we do. Our phones, I mean, Netflix, subscription pay. We talked about subscription pay, pay as you go. Like, why do I got to pay you 10 grand to get a degree? I want to just pay $3 grand, and I want to pay when I have to, or when I can, or when I get paid. And so a lot dumped out, right? So what do you make of all that? What do you make of my therapy session to you about what the heck's going on in education?
I'll be honest, I don't think it's therapy. I think it's just a healthy dose of reality, and here's why. There's a couple of different things I'll start with. Use the restaurant, or the analogy of food, and what people want today. Again, technology has enabled and opened a whole series of new possibilities to people. You can't take those possibilities away, and it doesn't matter how those possibilities manifest. But take education. You are basically saying what the world wants is the Chipotle version of Chipotle. You go in, and it was a hugely successful restaurant, not because everything looked the same and tasted the same every time. That was McDonald's. Ironic, most people don't know Chipotle spun out of McDonald's.
Yep.
So McDonald's is the master of the rinse and repeat robotic food produced model. It worked as a franchise because every time you're going to get exactly the same thing. Unless you say, take my pickle off, every Big Mac's going to look the same from Frankfurt to Tokyo and it works. That's what that franchise system. Well, the education process became kind of a franchise system in my view. It's rinse and repeat. This is what you're going to get. You're going to pay a whole bunch of money. You're going to go sit in a chair for 2 to 4 years. You're going to get a piece of paper, and the industry is going to appreciate it, and they're going to reward it. No. If you want to look about reward and how the world's changed, the business world is not slow to move as other entities are. The government is, and you asked why and why. It's just people don't want to change unless they really have to. Now, some want to. They're crazy people like us. That's what they would probably define us as. But we see changing as evolving and growing. Yeah. Doesn't mean everything's always going to work out right, but God knows, I think a life well lived is one where we're constantly pushing the bounds of our potential. And we tell this to the kids that come to this school. So we probably ought to live that ourselves every once in a while. So as an education machine, it's like, I got to quit being operating like a franchise, and I need to operate like construct your own burrito bowl. So what that means is I think I want to try this. Everything shouldn't lead to be a path of failure. We should reward opportunities for folks to do, and that's where certificate programs, competency-based learning, real-life experiences, all those come together to create a dynamic way of learning, being, growing, failing, all the process. And when school becomes like that, it kind of looks more like life. Because real life is that. It is not, there ain't no place where you're like, rinse, repeat, do this, turn in the paper, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, I go back to the business world. More and more businesses are eliminating the need for a college degree. They're actually rewarding trade schools are growing exponentially.
Yep.
People with real skills, and I'll tell you the real key. If you've got real skills and you have real motivation, intrinsic motivation, a desire to grow and learn, you will have the world is your oyster.
Yep.
And you've got all these tools. We have free online learning tools, right? So like you guys are doing, combine things that are free, maximize the kind of divergent experiences that people can get, celebrate opportunities to do experiments.
Right.
And if they fail, then that's just as much to learn and grow from. That's why one of my favorite things, and I did this in Afghanistan, and it was influenced by a gentleman who was dying of cancer. He used a very famous computer out of Carnegie Mellon, and he called it the Last Penguin. And this whole notion, right, of like he rewarded those who failed in the most glorious way in his computer, in his high-end Carnegie Mellon computer, because they tried. And he said, like, the passion and the courage. And so it was when we can celebrate failure as much as we celebrate success, and we know we're in a safe place that wants us to grow. I think that's the recipe for education, brother, of the future.
I love it. I mean, I feel it's kind of a joke I have with folks that, you know, if you deliver bad news or you gotta get on someone about something, you know, they walk away saying it's the best worst news I've ever heard, or you know, I mean it's that same thing. It's like that's the best failure that I've ever had because it's given me the ability to rethink, refocus, and I think, you know, move on in a better way. So as we kind of pull this conversation together, and I don't know, I'm feeling like a part 2 of this sometime down the road, but you know, you've had a wealth of experience, and you bring a fiery passion to this work that I think inspires and it influences and it motivates. I mean, I love this work and feel that I'm motivated, but you've just taken me to the next level, and I hope our audience feels the same way. So as we walk away from this and folks are driving and we're getting to the end of the podcast and some of them are like, gosh, thank God it's been a long podcast. What are 3 things? You know, for more for the audience, but I'm really thinking about this younger generation, you know, as they start to get their arms around what it is that they want to do and why they want to do it. What are 3 things you would say, here are 3 things you need to think about? These are the nuggets of wisdom from retired General John Michel. Young people out there, here's what I say to you.
I'd say number 1, suspend what you think you want to be and do, and just open yourselves to a whole slew of possibilities. What that means is by being open to experimentation, to testing things, this is the time to do it, especially in a college environment, or just being a young person is the best experience of life. It's the best time. We all know that looking back for a lot of reasons. And so be broadly open, more than you might even consider yourself to be today, because an open aperture leads to a bigger, better life. The second thing is understand life, all that really matters, and only really happens through relationship. Spend time and continue to make it a priority to learn not just how to be in a relationship, but how to be somebody who can kindle relationships. The art of connecting to people is fading away. It's just, I don't see it as much. We don't see the confidence in the handshakes, the look in the eyes, those little cues. Tells me a lot. So be that person that can be a connector of people, because now when you have a sense of possibility you walk the world through and you're a connector of people, it leads to the third one. There is nothing that you set your mind and heart to that cannot be done. It may take a couple of failures, but with the right people, the right passion, the ability to learn to be a good communicator, which is really what brings all this together. With the right people, the ability to communicate an idea, to be passionate and fueled by it, and to not bound yourself by what you think you can and do no matter where you started. That is actually, I think, the definition of a life well lived. And I think today's young people have more tools, more opportunity. It's a crazy exciting world.
It is.
To be a young person.
It is. I think it's the scariest time, perhaps, in some regard, but it's the most exciting. Thank you, sir, for being here today.
My pleasure, brother. Like I said, I really love everything y'all are doing here at the college.
We appreciate that. And again, thank you all out there listening to the podcast. And again, as we just heard, and really what this podcast is all about is eliminate that box, keep an open mind, and go out there and do good. Thank you so much.